It's 2025, the world is spinning. Somewhere in Washington, D.C., a decision is made that sends shockwaves north. Imagine the scene. A quiet morning in Ottawa, polite apologies, maple syrup being poured. Suddenly phones start ringing off the hook. The message? The United States, Canada's closest ally, its biggest trading partner, its next-door neighbor who sometimes borrows the lawnmower and forgets to return it, was about to slap massive tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. This wasn't just a policy change, it was a shot across the bow. A trade war was brewing, not with a distant rival, but with family. For decades, the U.S. and Canada had one of the most integrated economies on the planet. Goods, services, raw materials flowing across the border so seamlessly most people don't think about it. When the Trump administration officially pulled the trigger, it wasn't a small move. These weren't gentle, nudge-in-the-right-direction tariffs. They were a sledgehammer. The U.S. imposed heavy duties on Canadian steel and aluminum, citing national security concerns under a rarely used provision of U.S. trade law. To Canada, this was baffling. The idea that Canadian aluminum, the same stuff that goes into American-made cars and planes, was a threat to U.S. national security seemed ludicrous. It was like being told your poutine is a weapon of mass destruction. It just didn't make any sense. But Canada's response wasn't to just stand there and take it. Oh no. The Canadian government, known for its polite and measured demeanor, decided it was time to drop the niceties. They responded with a swift and powerful counterpunch. Canada announced it would impose its own retaliatory tariffs on a massive list of American goods. We're talking about dollar-for-dollar retaliation. Canada slapped a 25% tariff on U.S. steel and aluminum, hitting back with precise, targeted force. So why all this fuss about aluminum? And why was Canada so willing to go to the mat for it? To understand that, you have to look at one province in particular, Quebec. Montreal's charming streets poutine the French language, but you should also be thinking of aluminum. Lots and lots of aluminum. Quebec isn't just a player in the global aluminum market, it's a giant. 90% of Canada's primary aluminum production comes from Quebec. This makes Canada the fourth largest producer of aluminum in the world. This isn't just a side hustle, it's a cornerstone of its economy. The aluminum sector is the second largest economic driver right after aerospace. It brings in over $7.1 billion in exports and represents a massive 10% of the province's entire export market. The industry supports thousands of high-paying jobs, often in rural communities where good jobs can be hard to come by. So when the U.S. put tariffs on aluminum for Quebec, it was a direct threat to its economic heartland, its communities, and its way of life. But Quebec's aluminum isn't just about quantity, it's about quality and a unique, powerful advantage. Now you might think that a trade war would scare off investors. You'd expect companies to hit the pause button, wait for the storm to pass, and maybe even scale back their operations. But in Quebec, something incredible happened. They didn't just hold the line, they doubled down. In the middle of this intense trade dispute in July of 2025, one of Quebec's largest aluminum producers, Aluminerie Alouette, made a stunning announcement. They were investing a massive $1.5 billion into their facilities on the province's North Shore. This wasn't a tentative maybe, it was a firm commitment, with $750 million scheduled to be spent by 2030. This was a bold, defiant move. It was a signal to Washington and to the world that Quebec's aluminum industry was not going anywhere. This investment wasn't just about maintaining the status quo, it was about modernizing, expanding, and securing the future for the next 20 years. The smelter, which already employs around 950 people and produces 630,000 tons of aluminum a year, was preparing to become even more efficient and competitive. If you want to understand the real-world impact of these tariffs, you don't need to look at complex economic charts, you just need to look at one thing: the Ford F-150 pickup truck. The F-150 is an American icon. It's been the best-selling vehicle in the United States for decades. It's the workhorse of America, built by an American company. But here's the twist. A huge part of what makes the modern F-150 special comes directly from Canada. Specifically, it comes from the aluminum smelters of Quebec. A few years ago, Ford made a revolutionary decision. To make the F-150 lighter, more fuel-efficient, and stronger, they decided to build its body almost entirely out of high-strength military-grade aluminum alloy. And where did they source a huge portion of that specialized aluminum? You guessed it, Quebec. The province's smelters produce the high-quality, lightweight metal that Ford needs for its flagship truck. This created a deeply integrated supply chain. Canadian raw materials were being used to build an American icon in American factories, supporting jobs on both sides of the border. Then, the tariffs hit. Suddenly, the very material that Ford relied on became much more expensive. The U.S. government was effectively taxing one of its own most important manufacturers. In this high-stakes poker game of international trade, Quebec was holding a card, the green ace. The world is changing. Consumers, corporations, governments. And when it comes to aluminum, there is no one on earth who can produce it on a massive scale as cleanly as Quebec. This isn't just a marketing slogan, it's a hard scientific fact backed by an incredible natural advantage, an ocean of cheap, clean, renewable hydroelectric power. Let's break it down. Quebec has 9 massive aluminum smelters that churn out 3 million tons of the stuff every year. The United States, for all its economic might, simply cannot get aluminum this cheap and this easily from anywhere else in the world. The reason is electricity. Smelting is an energy hog, and in most parts of the world, that energy comes from burning fossil fuels like coal or natural gas. But in Quebec, the smelters are plugged directly into one of the world's largest and most sophisticated hydroelectric systems. This gives them a massive, permanent advantage in both cost and carbon emissions. This green advantage is not small, it's monumental. Quebec's aluminum generates far fewer greenhouse gases than its global competitors China, the Middle East. This makes it incredibly attractive to multinational corporations that have their own ambitious climate goals. Apple, BMW, Ford. They want to be able to say that their products, from iPhones to electric cars, are made with low-carbon materials. Quebec is one of the only places that can deliver on that promise at scale. This gives Quebec incredible leverage. Even with tariffs in place, American companies still needed its aluminum. But Quebec also knew it had other customers waiting in the wings. Europe and Asia, which are also moving aggressively on climate change, were more than happy to buy up Quebec's green aluminum. This meant that while the tariffs were painful, they weren't fatal. Quebec had options. Its green ace gave it the power to wait out the storm, confident that the world would eventually come knocking for its clean, green metal. This $1.5 billion bet wasn't just about money. It was about a deep-seated belief in their own strength and their indispensable role in the global economy. With a trade war raging, tariffs flying in both directions, you'd think business between the U.S. and Canada would grind to a halt. You'd expect investment to dry up and deals to be put on ice. But that's not what happened. In fact, during this period of intense friction, businesses were still finding ways to make deals. Big deals. In fact, during this period of intense friction, deals worth up to $12 billion were being forged. Deals worth up to $12 billion were being forged, proving that market forces can often be stronger than political posturing. How is this possible? It comes down to a simple, hard truth. The US and Canadian economies are too deeply intertwined to be easily separated. Take Quebec's aluminum industry again. Jean Simard, CEO, Aluminum Association of Canada. The markets were able to absorb the initial tariffs even at 25%. The demand from U.S. manufacturers was so strong, the supply from Quebec so essential, business found ways to work around the new costs. As we move into the late summer of 2025, the trade landscape is shifting once again. But it's not a simple surrender or a full-blown peace treaty. It's a strategic, calculated move by Canada. In a major announcement, the Canadian government declared it would remove retaliatory tariffs on a wide range of U.S. goods. By September 1, 2025, all tariffs on American products covered under CUSMA would be lifted. This was a significant step toward de-escalating the conflict and normalizing trade relations. On the surface, this looks like a concession. It's Canada blinking first, but look closer. The strategy is surgical. Canada is not backing down completely. It's removing tariffs on many consumer goods and other products, but it's keeping retaliatory tariffs in place on the critical items: steel, aluminum, autos. This is a surgical move. Canada extends an olive branch on one front while keeping pressure where it matters most. It's saying, we'll be reasonable, but not weak. Even at the height of the dispute, the vast majority of trade remained unaffected. 85% of Canada-US trade continued tariff-free. The fight was concentrated on a few symbolic, economically important sectors. So, after all the drama, the tariffs, the retaliation, the high-stakes deals, who actually came out on top? If you're looking for a simple winner and loser, you're not going to find one. This wasn't a hockey game with a clear final score, it was a messy, complex economic conflict where both sides took some hits, but one side seems to have emerged in a much stronger long-term position, and that side arguably is Canada, specifically Quebec. Let's look at the U.S. side of the ledger. The goal of the tariffs was to protect American industry and bring back jobs, but the reality was far more complicated. American manufacturers who rely on Canadian aluminum like Ford ended up paying hundreds of millions of dollars in extra costs. These costs were either absorbed, hurting their competitiveness, or passed on to American consumers in the form of higher prices for trucks, beer cans, and countless other goods. The tariffs acted less like a shield for American industry and more like a tax on it. In the end, the market has a way of picking its own winners.